Okay, welcome to Our Game Live here. My name is Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Fintan O'Toole and Michael Verney. Lads, how are you doing today? I'll start off with you, Fintan.
All good, Shane, yourself?
I'm not too bad. Michael?
Yeah, the finest, Shane. Good, yeah.
Before we truly kick into this, I'm just going to put up a quick clip of a video I recorded and put out there in the last day or two. Just curious because, you know, we're all desperate to get back to playing GAA or watching GAA, and I just thought I'd test it out. Could you play Gaelic games and contact sport in general with a face mask on? So here's a quick little teaser clip. Can you play sports while wearing a face mask? Okay, so that's up there live at the moment at OurGame.ie. Fintan, even yourself, what do you think? Could you imagine watching GA players running around with face masks on? Like we've seen it in the likes of, I don't know, at this stage, we've seen jockeys abroad wearing face masks, but it's a very different kettle of fish when you're trying to sprint around with a face mask on, as I found out.
Yeah, it's something that's hard to imagine, all right. But I think it probably gets to something I've kind of noticed over the last couple of weeks, that the tolerance and whether people are going to be patient enough to kind of stick to the roadmap that's been kind of put out for them, and the whole thing about writing off the GA season for 2020. I'm not sure as many people are kind of in agreement with that. I mean, definitely you can see, you know, people have pointed out the contradiction between that you can go to a park and, you know, have a puck around maybe with another person now, but you can't do that in your local GA club. And I think that's, you know, especially if the kind of number of cases kind of keeps staying at a low level in the coming weeks, I think the clamour is going to get louder for some kind of a comeback.
Yeah, Fintan, the old phone went on you there, did it? You're very popular, so I'm trying to ring you.
Got cut off from you there. But, you know, like I was just saying that I just think more and more people are going to start thinking, you know, kind of ways to kind of make a comeback in 2020 or kind of get back to some kind of a GA action. I'm not so sure there's going to be the kind of widespread acceptance that, you know, you can write off the year and kind of look ahead to 2021.
Yeah, I certainly don't subscribe to that. All these people are saying we need certainty now. I'm not sure why we need certainty now. We don't have certainty about anything in life, so why just, like, nearly every soccer league in Ireland, and you can take the League of Ireland out of that, pretty much has a return to play sort of an idea or a date put down at this stage. Michael Verney, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I think it's like, how do you find certainty in the most uncertain times possible? Like, it's very, very hard to find it. Just on the experiment that you did, you could just see it. I watched the whole video. You could just see it getting progressively worse and progressively harder. It's just, as Niall Keane, that was with you doing the video, said, it's like training at altitude. You're just struggling to get oxygen in. So I just don't see how the face mask will be a runner for GA. Even I think jockeys, when they go back now, they can wear a face mask, but have the option of pulling down the face mask during a race. Obviously, because they're going to struggle for air when you're driving a horse near the end of a race as well. So I just don't think it would be a runner in the GA as well. There was another thing that it's obviously going to be coming up to here, and that your line of vision could be affected when the ball is down at your feet in particular. Now, like some of us, like our sight is bad enough as it is. We don't need anything making it even worse. But I just don't think you'd be able to function properly during a match wearing that. As regards to the games coming back, yeah, I would agree with what Fintan said, and I know Liam Sheedy called for it last week for GA grounds to be open back up, and I would definitely echo that, particularly like as we get into June. Like, they're not supposed to open until July 20th. Like, we can still have, you know, social distancing with people, you know, using the walking track or using the running track, or, you know, two brothers out pucking in the field, or a couple of people pucking ball or kicking ball. It's still very safe, particularly for younger people. The amount of like cases amongst like young people, particularly like juveniles under the age of 14, is so minimal. It's not even funny. Like, and particularly in rural areas, like half the cases are within Dublin. So like, I think, like, let's say like Valencia or somewhere down in Kerry that's out in the middle of nowhere, I think they should be treated a little differently. Like, and people need that. I think people need the ability to be able to go out, have a few kicks or have a few pokes, have a walk, bring the dog for a walk. I think they need that as well. But I think all those restrictions will loosen. I think in a month's time, I think hopefully they might be looking into changing the status around GA grounds.
I think the onus is on people to try in their own sector to come up with ways to come back to. So you see with the Vintners Federation, they tried to come up with their own sort of return to, you know, opening businesses, pubs, and they kind of came up with their own measures and sort of pitched those. Maybe in GAA you could look at like having helmets that, rather than the face mask because it was stifling, that you could sort of compartmentalize the helmet so that this part of it you can still get air in to some degree, even from underneath. But that, I'm not really sure. I mean, maybe that wouldn't work at all. Maybe it's not feasible. But maybe the onus is on people within the GAA to make that happen, Fintan.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of points to as well the whole aspect of trying to live with it. Like, you know, I mean, that there's going to have to be some kind of a way for kind of games to come back in some shape or form. Like, I don't know, were you watching the Bundesliga action at the weekend? I mean, it was just interesting reading about it as regards what it actually entails. You know, from like a media point of view, you know, ball boys, security, all that, you know, as in how everyone was kind of treated for the weekend. And it kind of comes to, I think more and more I wonder, is it going to be more plausible that what John Cody was actually saying in an interview last week, that inter-county is probably the more realistic way to come forward, come back first in club. I know that might be to everyone's liking, but the fact that it's a smaller squad, they have medical staff already, they're kind of used to kind of testing procedures and all that. Just wonder, is it going to maybe be easier possibly to kind of, you know, hothouse inter-county squads and to kind of bring them back in that way? But definitely what you're kind of saying in terms of kind of a flexibility and in terms of kind of an adaptation, I think that's definitely the way that, you know, all sectors of like Irish society and around the world at the moment, like, it's kind of adapting to it in whatever field you're in. I think that's kind of grown on a lot of people, that that's going to be the way forward.
Aussie rules have very...
Shane, it was interesting, Shane, over the weekend to see FC Seoul in South Korea, which I thought was very interesting. They apologised to their fans for having sex dolls in the stands. So instead of fans, they had some sex dolls. It reminded me of the episode of Only Fools and Horses with the blow-up dolls. And just on that kind of topic, there's an interesting measure within the AFL. The AFL are obviously returning middle of next month, so a lot of the Irish boys, some of them have gone back already, but they'll all be back. They're getting back training. I think they started some training yesterday, and they'll start contact training over the coming weeks. But the AFL's return to play protocols prohibit players from having visitors other than their partner or a friend or family member providing care for their well-being. So it's basically prohibiting, how should we say, guests coming to people's houses. And apparently a lot of the single AFL players are a bit upset and put out over this. This visitations rule has been dubbed the bonk ban by local media, which is interesting. I just imagine trying to enforce that within the GAA.
Yeah, we probably won't labour on that point too long. Michael, we start off with the Who Am I every week, or every show actually. We have Michael breadcrumb out a few clues for us, and we try and guess who it is. And obviously viewers can get their answers in. So Michael, go ahead with the first clue.
Yeah. First one is, I am an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship winner in the past 10 years, who is older than Verney. I'm 33, but younger than Saint, who is significantly older than me. So I am an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship winner in the past 10 years who is older than Verney but younger than Saint. So there's obviously quite open-ended at the moment, but it will become clearer as we go along.
Fintan, top of your head now, someone who's in their mid-20s.
Right, last 10 years, going through the Kilkenny team. Trying to think. So are we saying at the time they won the All-Ireland they were older than Verney?
I don't think so. You're saying at the moment their age?
At the moment, yeah.
I'm thinking Brendan Bugler. I'm thinking maybe Michael Fennelly, somewhere in that range. Okay, look, we'll come back to that in a little while and get a second clue off you. The first thing talking point we want to look at today is footballers who we probably just didn't see enough of due to injury. You know, lads who were absolutely brilliant. It was very obvious that they were going to be a star, but probably injury robbed them. And I think Matt Connor must be the biggest name of all, because he was just a glorious footballer back in the early 80s, and injury obviously robbed him of the rest of his career at age 24. But you know, when you look back at these classic games, Fintan, you see him playing against Kerry, and he's got the grace and the flow of a footballer. Now, he's obviously your county, Michael Verney, but he just has the grace and flow of a guy who actually is a Kerry footballer and a Kerry grade.
Yeah, he does. I think he came up recently as well with a friend of this show, Will O'Callaghan, was picking his Offaly Mount Rushmore for off the ball, and I think he was initially omitted, and Shane Lowry was kind of saying he'd quite happily give up his spot for him. So, like, you know, Verney will explain this better than we will, but he seems absolutely revered in Offaly for what he achieved. and for kind of his attacking style of play and all that. And I obviously never saw him play, kind of like going on old footage. But the thing that kind of strikes is how much admired he seems to have been outside of the county. I mean, you could say that given the standards Kerry football has, it probably maybe takes a lot of times to impress them. But a lot of those players, they all seem to have been really, really impressed by Matt Connor. I can't remember what year was it that he got 2-9. Was it in an All-Ireland semi-final? Was it against Kerry?
1980, yeah, 1980, yeah.
That game has been kind of talked about a lot, and that is just that his kind of, his movement, his kicking style, all that, scoring ability, that he could have, fitted comfortably into any era or any team.
Yeah, I presume you've, that Fintan is on the ball there. He's just absolutely revered in the county, Mike.
Absolutely revered, yeah. Looking back at the clips now, and I just looked at a bit before we come on here, you look at, old footballers from 30 or 40 years ago, and you wonder, would they have fit in the modern game? He was lean, he had skill, power, pace, poise, left foot, right foot, a brilliant dummy, a brilliant sidestep. He basically had it all. He would have absolutely thrived in the modern game. And you look at his scoring records, it's a 6-year career with Offaly. That's all it was, 6 years. He scored 13 goals, 142 points. That 2-9 that Fintan says in the 1980 semi-final against Kerry is widely regarded as one of the greatest individual performances of all time. He enjoyed massive success with Walsh Island, which is a tiny club in North Offaly on the Laois Offaly border, playing with his cousins Liam and Tomas, and obviously his brother Richie, who captained the side in '82. Absolutely revered. He obviously had the car accident on Christmas Day of 1984, which left him paralysed, and Offaly didn't compete in another Leinster final until 1997. After that incident, had obviously won the All Ireland in '82, were beaten by Dublin in '83 in the final, and never appeared in another Leinster final. And that's Matt not being there is obviously was a massive reason for that. He was just unbelievably talented, and as I said, he wasn't carrying any weight. He had the ability to go on, and we hadn't seen his best football yet. Best footballer, you usually see 27, 28. So you're probably going to see Matt in the Offaly jersey for another 10 years. And the fact that he was able to kick frees and do all that as well meant that he'd be the sort of lad that you could keep playing him as long as he was fit to play until his mid to late 30s. Just an outstanding footballer. And yeah, just we talked to Pat Spillane a few weeks ago, Shane, he was the one thing he said about 82. If the only good thing came out of 82 is that Matt Connor got an All-Ireland medal, well then I'm okay with that. That's just how revered he was.
Brian Mullins was another that suffered a terrible time with a car accident. Obviously his wasn't quite as severe as Matt Connor's, which of course was terrible. But can I just ask you about Walsh Island? Do you know why the club is called that? There's so many interesting club names out there, and I always think of Ladies Walk, a junior hurling club down in Kerry, and that was something to do with the old I think English landlords, and there used to be a particular area where the women would walk up and down that was called Ladies Walk. But why is it called Walsh Island? Is it something like, obviously Offaly is one big massive bog. Was there a patch of grass in the middle somewhere and they just called it Walsh Island?
I knew once I mentioned Walsh Island I was going to be asked, and I wouldn't mind. I actually trained down there a bit when I was on the Offaly football panel, and I actually don't know the exact reasons behind it. It's something to do with that. Walsh Island is obviously in the middle of a bog. It's not an island of land, but it's an island per se. It's tiny. It is tiny. It's you're looking at 20 to 30 houses back in the day when the Connors were playing, and they competed in Leinster finals and everything back in the day. I'm not sure of the exact reason why it is called Walsh Island though, but I'm sure one of our many Offaly viewers will chime in and let us know.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on the comments in case anyone does get back to us. Fintan, any other footballer come to mind when you think of those that we didn't quite get to see the best of?
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking about this, that the players that kind of strike to mind to me are players who kind of suffered multiple injuries, that would suffer a serious injury, would try and rehabilitate and come back. And the kind of ones that really kind of bring to mind is the cruciate has always been the big injury of the last kind of decade. A couple of guys who've done it twice, like David Moran did it twice early on in his career. I mean, he obviously came from, a big family background, rich football heritage and all that. Was trying to break into a really, really strong Kerry team. Does his cruciate twice. Then he suffers a really serious eye injury in 2013. But he comes back at the end of that year, and then by the following year, 2014, he's starting the team and wins an All-Star. So he's probably one that maybe it's kind of different, that we have probably seen him at his peak, and especially last year as well, he was really, really good. He's kind of rehabilitated from them. But Colm O'Neill probably is the one that kind of spring to mind as well. I mean, like 3 cruciate injuries. I mean, he still packed a lot into his career. You know, he played in an All-Ireland senior final, won a medal. He won 2 under-21 medals, was captain for one of those, and he won his All-Star in 2012. But every time the career was kind of getting going, it was kind of hit by that injury. So I was looking at it, was 08, 2011 and 2013, he suffered the 3 of them. I think 13 as well was a really, really bad blow for him, because obviously you're going to say, well, it was the third one, which obviously makes it more serious. But given how well he played in 2012, and I mean, I think I've also thought that at times Cork probably played better football in 2012 than they played in 2010. I mean, the first half, say that All-Ireland semi-final against Donegal, was absolutely brilliant stuff to watch, and he is playing really, really good. I think it's Neil McGee's marking him, but he was brilliant that year. He got an All-Star. But you know, you think then, right, he'll bound into 2013 and he'll have a good run in it. And it was against Donegal again in a league game that he did for the 3rd time. Now he came back. He played for a couple of years, and it was impressive to kind of keep going as long as he did, even mentally, as much as anything. You know, Paddy Bradley's another one that, you know, he would have done a cruciate twice in kind of quick succession. You know, like, I suppose we did see a lot of him, in fairness, you know, over the years, but probably it was a difficult end to his career. I think he did it twice in the space of 18 months around 2011, 2012.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned Colm O'Neill, and I remember he went out to do the international rules in Australia, and we were in, I think it was Perth maybe, and he was coming down the street, you know, there was a big gang of them, maybe there was a press event going on. I remember thinking how built up his legs were, his thighs, so obviously you build up all the muscles either side of the cruciate to try and, I suppose, take a lot of the load for the knee. But yeah, in great nick. Yeah, you just wonder what level he would have got to, because he was a young footballer of the year. You mentioned David Moore, his good friend who went down under, Tommy Walsh, he was a footballer of the year, young footballer of the year in 2008, and David Moore, I think, briefly went down under with him. But of course, injuries,
for about 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah, and like, he ripped the hamstring off the bone, came back to Ireland eventually, I think around 2014, never fully, because of injury, got to the level that 2008 promised when himself and Donaghy were the Twin Towers for Kerry. You just wonder what level, like, and he has actually shown flashes of it in the last couple of years. Even I remember being down at watching Kearns O'Reilly play in late 2017 or late 2018, and he was going around with his hamstring just completely bandaged up, standing on the square, could barely move. But then again, last year we did see signs that this guy has serious talent, and you just wonder what level he would have got to.
Yeah, I think the complication for him as well is that it wasn't just a serious injury he suffered. He was trying to come back and play a different sport. And I mean, if you chat to any of the guys, the rule guys who come back, there really is this sense, especially if they played well before, or they've kind of emerged for the county before they moved to Australia. Like, everyone expects them to come back in the exact same, you know, shape and the kind of same form that they were in beforehand. But like, it doesn't work like that. And the way that Aussie rules has kind of changed. Like, if you think about maybe 10, 15 years ago, the type of Aussie rules player was kind of, you know, really, really big, powerful figure. Now it's kind of a bit more athletes are looking for. The game has kind of changed a bit, and the physical requirements are different. And then obviously they're coming back, like we've talked a lot about how Gaelic football has changed. So Tommy Walsh had to come back from that injury, get himself right, and then kind of get himself back for a Gaelic football, a sport that had completely changed from the one he'd left and the one he'd excelled in 08 and 09. But yeah, like, you're right, it definitely was at the Tyrone game last year when he came on. You know, there was kind of flashes that he was kind of coming back and could have been really, really kind of threatening again. And obviously this would have been a big season for him then to kick on and, you know, kind of get that confidence under his belt. So maybe there's still hope for him yet. You know, there's a couple of others that we were kind of talking about. Michael Meehan's probably one of the biggest ones, isn't he? Really, nothing. It was kind of, it seemed like it was the ankle the whole time. That was the issue, and that never really kind of probably got right for him. Because he had such unbelievable success at the start of his career. I mean, he had 2 All-Ireland under-21s, a Hogan Cup, a Sigerson, and an All-Ireland club medal, and probably the star on all of those teams. And that was at the age of 21. And then he won a couple of Connacht seniors after that, but he didn't quite. All his success was kind of front-loaded at the start of his career. Now, part of that was because of Galway, the way they kind of maybe sit down from the top tier. But it's hard to think of a guy who, you know, achieved so much and packed so much in the early years and was touted so much. And everyone talks about the flashes after that. Maybe the Kerry game in 08 and the rain kind of stands out, and the goal he got against Cork in 2013. But, you know, frustrating for him more than anyone. We just didn't really see enough of it.
And even Sean Armstrong to some degree lost plenty of games due to injury, and they both made a comeback laterally under Kevin Walsh. Other players that kind of stand out here, Collie Moore, and I think even with Dublin, injuries would definitely hard on him. Danny Hughes of Down, of course, he was brilliant and won an All-Star in 2010 when they got to the All-Ireland. Marty Clark with illness, and obviously he was flip-flopping with the AFL. Shane O'Rourke for me, I'd love to have seen the heights he would have got to. James O'Donoghue, since winning Footballer of the Year, I mean, he's just been, his our career has been pockmarked with injuries. And Ronan Clark, of course, absolutely brilliant for Armagh, but same thing again, he just had injury after injury. Michael Verney, anyone else standing out to you?
No, Ronan Clark is definitely the one that stands out for me. He's obviously Young Footballer of the Year in 2002. He actually went on to win 2 All-Stars after that. But he was riddled with injury, and he was just like, he was a big kind of a bullock of a full forward that was brilliant with the ball in hands, was brilliant off left and right. He was just a really important forward, and we just didn't get to see enough of him. James O'Donoghue, you mentioned there as well. He just hasn't been able to get back to the heights of 14. He was actually very good in the 15 final and was amazingly taken off, having been their top scorer from play that day. They'd probably be 2 that would stand out. We're still hoping that we might see that from James O'Donoghue, who was very good in the league this year before obviously it finished up. And Shane O'Rourke is another one that you mentioned there. Obviously he has the pedigree. Son of Colum has been brilliant with Simonstown when he's able to stay fit, won a couple of county titles there, but just has had different sort of knee trouble, ankle trouble the whole way through. And it's just, when you have a big injury like that and you're able to get a run, it's okay. But when you have a big injury like that and you pick up a niggle and you pick up another niggle and you're just getting back right, and even Michael Meehan was the same. Like, it was management towards the end of the last 6 or 7 years. He had to be, specifically managed, and it does get difficult at intercounty level when you have to be managed like that. But hopefully someone like James O'Donoghue, we still could see him rise to those heights of 2014 again.
Fintan, you just wanted to mention Liam Doyle of Down as well.
Yeah, he just kind of jumped to mind because he was a guy I didn't really see much of him at senior level, but I just remember that Down. I was looking at, he captained Down to win the All-Ireland minor in 1999, and he was like unbelievably well touted, and like there was a good few guys on that team. So Benny Coulter came along and was one of Down's most successful footballers of the following decade. But I was just reading up on him. This was his kind of injury run. He was captain of Down in 2007. Season disrupted by hamstring quad injuries. 2008 he tore cruciate in his left knee. Rehab was delayed by an infection in the knee. And then he suffered quite serious tendonitis in the opposite knee, which extended his sidelines even further. And then that all led into 2010, the 1 year that Down get on a bit of a run in the qualifiers, get all the way to the All-Ireland final, and he's absent. And obviously one of the, when you only lose the All-Ireland final by a point, there's probably enough what is for Down football, but you just wonder, someone like him, if he could have maybe kind of realised the potential that he's shown at a younger age, or got the chance to, I suppose, more than anything, and he got a clear run of it. But that's a serious blow. The other one that kind of sprung to mind is one of the worst injuries I remember in Simcoe Park with Bino McDonald's. I think maybe 2004. I mean, he was another heavily touted underage player, and in fairness, he played quite well for a good few years at senior level. But you just wonder as well what sort of an effect such a serious injury had on him.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anyone we've left out, feel free to get a comment in. Actually, Michael, there might be a couple of comments if you want to read them out to us, and then maybe you might move on to the second clue. Yeah,
just not comments specifically on what we're talking about there, but a couple of comments about earlier. The legendary RF was on YouTube just saying gum shields are a major issue, particularly in football, obviously, constantly being put in and taken out of the mouth using hands, and that's like, if you've played football, it's very hard to leave the gum shield in. You do have to take it out, and the nature of it is that there's normally liquid in your mouth as a result of the gum shield being there, so you probably have to spit it out. And what did he say as well? He just said, with regards to Walsh Island, so he basically kind of confirmed what you said. It's a patch of good land surrounded by bog, hence the name Island, and it was originally owned by someone named Walsh, so they put Walsh and Island together. That's a couple of the comments that we've had in. Just with regards to the next clue, the first clue was, I'm an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship winner in the past 10 years, who is older than Verney but younger than Saint. The second one is, I have won All-Irelands as a player and a coach. So think about maybe what sort of counties that might entail. So I've won All-Irelands as a player and a coach. I don't want any guesses, because Fintan spoiled the party for all our viewers last week by mentioning Anthony Lynch after the third guess.
Right. Okay. I have to be honest, I'm not actually entirely sure. Fintan, are you going to spoil the party here?
No, I'll hold fire for the next clue.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to our next section. So we've been looking to see who's the best All-Ireland winner of the past 16 seasons. I'm just going to put it up on screen here, the sort of knockout competition we have going. So the most recent quarter-final we had was 2007 Kilkenny against 2005 Cork. And the Kilkenny men romped home with the public vote we had on OurGame.ie. So we're going to go for the second quarter-final today, which is 2013 Clare against 2011 Kilkenny. Now, I think what we have here, lads, is, and I'll start with you, Fintan, is we have a 2011 Kilkenny team that wrested the title back off Tipperary, a Tipperary team that was supposed to sort of take over for 10 years. And then on the flip side, you have Davy Fitzgerald Clare team that in 2013 had apparently changed hurling forevermore. So where do you start out with this matchup?
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting as well with the routes they took. Clare playing double the amount of games that season, so there's obvious kind of credit in the way that they managed to move back from. Well, remember that semi-final? They were really disappointing that day against Cork in Munster, and had to win after extra time against Wexford. They beat a Galway team that had got to the All-Ireland final the year before. Then probably came in a bit under the radar in comparison to Limerick for the semi-final. And then there was the 2-game saga that we won't talk about in the final. But yeah, like I think it's like that Kilkenny team. I mean, everyone goes on about the kind of 08 team, but like I think that 2011 was fairly close to the peak of their powers as well. Like you had a couple of guys like Michael Verney, Michael Rice. You think of even as well. Like I suppose they lost the league final that year in May, so whatever question marks were kind of on about them after the All-Ireland final in 2010, they were maybe kind of doubled in, I suppose, the pronouncements that were being made about their future.
Yeah, but that was such nonsense, Fintan. That was such nonsense at the time, because like they lost the league final to Dublin, but I think they had only about 7 of their team available. Like they had so many All-Stars and even a couple of hurlers of the year that had to come back later in the summer, so it was so overblown.
I agree with you on that, but it did feed into the whole sense of that, they were beatable, because for so long they were seen as this kind of invincible side, but then the way that they came back, obviously they turned the tables fairly convincingly over Dublin, then the next final, as you said, when they kind of players back. That was, like a Waterford side who probably was in the last year or two of that kind of evolution.
They've been beaten by 7 goals by Tipperary, but to be fair, yeah, having gotten hammered a few years before, that Waterford team gave a fairly good examination of Kilkenny, and remember Milan had an unbelievable game at centre forward as well. So, but definitely that Kilkenny team was very, very strong. Michael, any particular thoughts on that? Well, what are your opening thoughts on this particular matchup?
I suppose like you're probably going to add in the caveat at some stage. I'd imagine you will. Like Liam Sheedy had obviously left Tipperary. Tipperary were. I'm not saying they weren't in disarray in 2011, but they were not the same team as they were in 2010. They still had the residual effect of Eamon O'Shea and Liam Sheedy and Mick Ryan being involved, but they weren't the same team. Obviously, they were brilliant in the Munster final. I don't know whether there was complacency or whatever, but Tip were never really in. Tip were in that final, but they were never really in it, if you know what I mean.
Hold on, I'll just stop you there. This was Declan Ryan took over this particular season, so it was a full sort of change in management. And I think once Dublin realised in the semi-final that this was Tip, a new version of Tip where it was long ball after long ball, Kilkenny were able to study them and very much plan around that. But other than that, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Just can we look at that Clare team? So I'm just going to bring them up on screen here. But that Clare team, as you said, Fintan, they didn't start out the season particularly well and got beaten comprehensively enough by Cork. Was it Brian Murphy who did a job on Tony Kelly that first day out?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, he would have kind of followed him. He obviously started out his career as kind of an inside defender, but in that latter team was kind of moving towards a kind of a half backline floating role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they played a few weeks previously, do you remember, in like our league relegation playoff. So it was the first of a series of meetings that season.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very much a clash of styles. So a physically athletic Kilkenny team that are able to win their own ball, go long anytime they want, versus a Clare team that an awful lot of fast, dynamic players, small, nippy players. And I think it's such a shame that over the years that we never actually saw these two teams play against each other, because obviously Clare, the one time in the space of a decade that they got to Croke Park in the latter stages of the championship, if you take out 2010 when they played a qualifier there, they just weren't getting to Croke Park. This would have been an actual dream matchup at the time, Michael Verney.
Yeah, it definitely would have been. I mentioned it to you before. Tommy Walsh has talked about. He talked about the Jackie Clare not openly, but he said to Jackie, and Jackie mentioned it in his book. Jackie and Tommy were chatting the winter of 2013, and Tommy came up to Jackie, and he had a fire in his eyes almost, and he was like, I'll take Kelly, you take Podge Collins, and that was tunnel vision what they had in their head for 2014. It's almost like Clare had kind of ripped up the script, according to some people, and even in Tommy's eyes, obviously. And going into 2014, Clare were the favourites going in. Clare were revolutionising hurling. It was kind of a running game mixed with a sweeper at times. All pace, all youth. Kilkenny were coming to the end if they'd met in 2014. Unfortunately, they never met. And to me, that's what doesn't legitimise, Clare's 2013 win, that the fact that they didn't get back to Croke Park for another 5 years. Kilkenny held up their side of the bargain and were in Croke Park for the semi-finals and finals in 14 and 15 and 16, and Clare were kind of nowhere to be seen. And while it was brilliant at the time, and those matches against Cork were absolutely unbelievable, two of the best games I was ever at, like the longer it goes on, it does seem like, okay, that was a missed opportunity for Cork, because everyone else was beaten along the way, and it was Clare basically took advantage of the opportunity that was in front of them. Haven't been able to produce anything like that since. Whereas if you look at the Kilkenny from 2011 onwards, obviously 1 in 12, 1 in 14, 1 in 15. So they backed it up, whereas Clare haven't. So that definitely would take away from the Clare 2013 win when you're comparing it with Kilkenny in 2011.
But if you're isolated to the season themselves, I don't know as much. Sorry, Fintan, jump in there.
Yeah, I was just saying as well, the thing is they developed quite a history, Clare and Kilkenny, especially that Clare team at underage level. I mean, in 2010, Kilkenny beat them in the minor final, and then in 2012 it was the under-21 final, and that was the kickstart of that kind of Clare golden era. And I was just looking at it, I mean, like that Kilkenny team had Walter Walsh, Padraig Walsh, John Power, Kevin Kelly, Jerry Aylward, a good few guys who went on to play senior. And then obviously Clare's team was littered with players who would 12 months later go on to win the All-Ireland. So it seemed that Kilkenny had seen Clare win an All-Ireland 21 title in style in 2012, then win the senior in 13. They obviously won the 21 as well in 13. Looked like they were going to kind of take over the world. But yeah, like you said, Pat's never kind of crossed the senior level. And that's ultimately, I think, the context in which you look at this. You think of, I suppose if you look at it in kind of an isolation in the 2013 triumph or the 2011, it's kind of a clash of styles, and there's a lot of really impressive players on both teams. And Kilkenny come back from a 2010 defeat, Clare come back in the middle of the 2013 championship. But as Michael has said, it's kind of framed by what that Kilkenny team went on to achieve. And by the next time that Clare really got to Croke Park and challenging in 2018, it was a vastly different Clare team. A lot of those, the older guys have kind of moved on, change of management. Okay, you still had Tony Kelly was still a big part of it, and Podge was still playing well and all that. But I mean, it was guys like Aaron Shanahan, Jason McCarthy was getting the levelling point. It was different kind of guys, but before the team evolved and changed an awful lot.
But the criteria is that team from 2013 against that team in 2011. It isn't necessarily everything either side of it. So I think it's definitely worth keeping it just, a total focus on that team that year. What about the managers then, Fintan? Because like Davy Fitz, obviously things didn't start out well. We've talked about that game against Cork in the Munster Championship. But this is a guy who had Patrick Donnellan sweeper against Galway, worked an absolute treat, completely ran Limerick off the road in the semi-final, although Limerick I think died under the lights that day. Then in the All-Ireland final, the Shane O'Donnell trick absolutely worked a treat as well. He got everything right, whereas Brian Cody on the other side, he turns the ship around from the previous year, man-marks Lara Corbett in the final, so he changed his tack from 2010. So both managers actually have a lot of credit here.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. Like Davies is those kind of decisive master strokes, as you call them, as you would look at them. Like, I mean, you mentioned a good few of them. The obvious one is, the Shane O'Donnell one, the way he told them, the way he was told so late in the day on the Saturday, the way he'd identified that he was a guy that could come in and kind of do something. And even though then he used Derek Conan at the end of that game, he comes on and gets the fifth goal to kind of seal it. He just they kind of really went for it in that game. But then Cody, it's just kind of, I suppose, a more kind of restorative job that he does over the course of the season. I mean, I know what you were saying about the league final, but I still think it's an impressive feat the way, it's two finals that they've lost in Croke Park, and that they come back and they kind of reassert their dominance. But the quality of players that Cody had at his disposal then, though. I mean, that was when like TJ Reid wasn't starting. Richie Hogan, was that his kind of first All-Ireland final start? He gets a goal in it.
I think he might have started previously, but maybe have been injured or something like that. But yeah, your point is taken, yeah.
But like, you know, you still had Eddie Brennan there and Shefflin and all that. They had a lot of the kind of the older stage of stars, but it was starting to become maybe, you know, like Michael Verney was really, really asserting himself. I mean, that goal when he kind of charges through the defence, it set the tone really. And then obviously the man-to-man thing that they did with Clare, because obviously it wasn't just the 2010 hat-trick with Clare. I mean, obviously that year's Munster final he got, it was 4 goals, wasn't it, against Waterford. So he really was the kind of the guy that all the coverage was about. So that, I suppose that kind of man-to-man job. So yeah, they both kind of there's a lot of kind of credit for them. And again, that was the other thing about it, wasn't it, that afterwards it would have been like the Davy v Cody matchup, and instead we've had to wait for Davy to kind of go to Wexford to kind of see him regularly kind of go up against Cody. And obviously it's under kind of vastly different circumstances, so you didn't get the matchup on the pitch afterwards, and you didn't get it on the sideline afterward either with those counties or teams.
And you mentioned Michael Verney there. I'd like to see a matchup with him against maybe Colin Galvin when the two of them are at the peak of their powers. Any matchup in particular stand out for you, Michael Verney? I mean, Henry Shefflin, maybe Brendan Bugler might go for him.
Yeah, Jackie on Podge Collins would have been interesting. Like, Podge Collins delivered a performance in the drawn match in the All-Ireland final that day. It was outrageous. He got that point, that kind of no-look point off the hurl underneath the Cusack stand, which was absolutely outrageous. Then, you know, Tommy said he wanted Tony Kelly. It'd be interesting to see would he be let pick up Tony Kelly, who was playing kind of that deep line kind of centre forward role. Brian Hogan obviously would have been playing in 11 in that deep sitting centre back role too.
Can I make a point here? Because Tommy Walsh is a sort of wing back who always did a load of hurling himself. Probably stylistically, the last thing you want to do and put on Tony Kelly is someone who wants to do too much hurling themselves. And then you would imagine that Brian Hogan wouldn't be a natural fit for Tony Kelly either.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. Tommy would have hurled a load of ball, but if Tony Kelly hurls a load of ball, he gets 4 or 5 points. And Brian Hogan sitting back to protect the full back line would have meant that maybe Mick Fennelly was going to have to sit back maybe on Tony Kelly. So it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to see if they'd maybe they'd put Jackie out on Tony Kelly like he did with maybe Lara and follow him around. You just don't know. That would have been very, very interesting. As you mentioned, Henry on Bugler or Henry on Conor Ryan at the time, who was probably playing the actual centre back role, whereas Pat Donlan maybe was sitting back sometimes, would have been very, very interesting as well. But the battle of the sideline would have been really the key one, and it's great to see that. We always wanted to see it, and we saw a bit with Waterford and Kilkenny, obviously. We didn't really get to see Clare and Kilkenny, apart from that big league semi-final in Thurles one day where Clare kind of gave Kilkenny a bit of a pace, and I think it was 16. But now we've got to see the rivalry that we always wanted. And like, I know that Brian Cody definitely respects Fitzy. He would have unbelievable respect for him, but he must see him as a fair annoyance now at this stage too, given that what he's done with Wexford. So it would have been nice to see another layer to this. Like, they could have met when Davy was over Waterford, when he was over Clare in Championship. They didn't, obviously, and then Wexford. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting rivalry, but there's some great matchups that could have taken place.
Okay, well, I'll make our own call here. I can't look past that Kilkenny forward line, and even Michael Verney, hurler of the year at the time at midfield. Eddie Brennan, Richie Power, Henry Shefflin, Colin Fennelly, Larkin, Hogan, TJ Reid not even getting into the team. So I'm going to go with Kilkenny there. What do you think, Fintan?
Yeah, I'm going with Kilkenny as well. I mean, I was just thinking of it, like, if Cork scored 316 in 2 games against that Clare defence in 2013, and you would think, looking on paper, that Kilkenny forward line, Brennan, Power, Shefflin, Fennelly, Larkin, Hogan, and with TJ coming off the bench, that they would be able to put up a winning total.
Yeah, Michael, I presume you're going to go with Kilkenny.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting, because Davy definitely would have played the sweeper against Kilkenny, and a tactic that we have seen to really stifle Kilkenny in recent years, in particular, most notably with Wexford and even with Anthony Daly's Clare back in the day. So it would have been interesting, but I just think Kilkenny would have found a way. They might have struggled for periods and struggled to deal with the pace of Clare, but I just think they would have found a way. That team invariably did find a way. And as you say, that's a star-studded forward line. Very, very hard to see past them not being able to put up a 219, 220 total, which I think would have been enough to get the job done.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it out to a public vote on OurGame.ie and we'll see who gets through to the next round. Actually, speaking of Kilkenny, I interviewed Davy Fitzgerald last week and I had a quick word with him about Brian Cody and the massive change in the manager after the 2005 season when they were beaten by Galway in the semi-final. So here's a quick snippet.
Back in the early days, Brian was a bit more relaxed. And I remember we used to go, I think it was actually 2003, for the Ireland final, the Ireland semi-final. We went down on a paintballing trip. This is how, back then, how it was. It was a paintballing trip instead of a trip away training. And we did a paintballing. So it was around Bennett's Bridge at the time. And we had a few cans back in the shed where all the paintballing gear was, and we were allowed drinking. This is literally 3 weeks out from the Ireland semi-final. And Brian had a few cans as well, So, and he was talking to players. I remember him in dressing rooms. He'd have the banter with Stephen Graham, with PJ Ryan. He'd be slagging about where they're from, and he was more involved with the players as a manager, But then around 2005.
Okay, that was Davy Fitzgerald. You can get the rest of that interview on OurGame.ie. Michael Verney, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, just something Fintan was saying earlier about kind of Davy adapting on that in the Clare in 2013. Cody adapted massively with Kilkenny in 2011. They'd obviously been beaten in 2010. The drive for 5 was gone. And it looked like it was all about legs and pace. And he actually brought them away down to Limerick to Ger Hartman's clinic in UL, where he tried to revitalise them and re-energise them. So it's just funny, while he's known as, someone with no tactics, which is complete lies, he was definitely willing to try different things, particularly when things went wrong. He was willing to be more open-minded. Interesting to hear Taggy saying there, because his mentality definitely changed. He probably realised he was in for the long haul and that he couldn't be pally-pally with these lads or it wouldn't work out in the long term. Just on our Who Am I have the third clue here. So just go back through the clues quickly. I am an All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship winner in the past 10 years who is older than Verney but younger than Saint. I have won All-Irelands as a player and a coach. And the third clue is my 2 All-Irelands were serving under the same manager. So the All-Ireland I won as a player and the All-Ireland I won as a coach were under the same manager. So I serving under the same manager. So I'll take any suggestions on YouTube or on Twitter or anything like that if anyone has any idea. If you guys have an idea, maybe have a think, but don't say.
A couple of Kilkenny names are coming to mind, but I'm not 100% sure. Fintan, do you feel like you know it?
Just the county, Kilkenny as well, trying to narrow it down, but no, not definite on this one.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a little while. I don't know if any of you have been watching The Last Dance, Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in recent times, but there was a big, in one of the last episodes, there was a big focus on Game 5 in 1997 of the NBA Finals and the Utah Jazz, the apparent flu game where he obviously came down. It was actually food poisoning the night before this huge game in the NBA Finals, and he still has an unbelievable performance, and the Bulls win. So we've got our own flu game, which is Brian Whelahan in 1998. He comes down with a flu before the All-Ireland final against Kilkenny and ends up giving a man-of-the-match performance, scored 1-6, I think, Michael Verney. But it's a huge sliding doors moment, and we already did a sliding doors moment on Rhino Dwyer last week and in 2013, the red card against Cork. But this was also a huge sliding doors moment because Brian Whelahan went from starting wing back to quickly being moved up full forward, and the ramifications were huge.
Yeah, it was massive. Now, Brian Whelan didn't have a pizza the night before the match like Michael Jordan did. I actually couldn't believe that. It's funny. Maybe it's just back then, or maybe he just thought he could eat or do anything he wanted and smoke the cigars and do whatever he wanted. But Brian Whelan one is really, really interesting. So the night before the All-Ireland final in '98, it'd obviously been a big saga to get there, 3-game saga with Clare. He was out at Borough Intermediates were playing. Borough Intermediates or juniors were playing Crinkle in a championship game. And he was standing beside his brother Simon and he kind of started sneezing or whatever. Got progressively worse as the match going on. And Simon's asking him, like, you all right or what's going on? He said he had an awful head cold. And eventually, like, those things get worse as they do. So he woke up the next morning, absolutely stuck to the bed, heavy-legged, everything. They tried all sorts, obviously, to get, revitalise him or whatever. And he went out wing back the day of the All-Ireland final and was on Brian McAvoy, who was having a game and a half, one of his best games for Kilkenny. I think he had 3 points got, and when Brian, I think, saved the 21 from DJ and was getting on a bit of ball, Brian McAvoy was having a massive impact on the game. So, like, in fairness to Michael Bond, who hadn't been there that long, it was a big move, and I'm sure they hadn't really discussed it beforehand. But they switched Michael Duignan back wing back from wing forward, and they put Brian Whelahan up full forward, and the rest is history. Just an unbelievable All-Ireland final display. He was only up in the forward line for 45 minutes, and he ends up at 1-6 and the crucial goal at the end of the game. And Kilkenny they must think like what would have been if Brian Whelahan hadn't been switched. Brian McAvoy probably would have got another couple of scores, and Offaly would have been missing that spark up front. Michael Dignan never would have came back and got that unbelievable point that he did at the end of the game and end up with his sole All-Star at the end of the year. It's just amazing, as we say, the sliding doors. It's amazing the cause and effect of different things.
What do you think, Fintan? Because there's always a chance that if he didn't get that flu, that he would have given an exhibition wing back, because didn't he get 5 Man of the Match awards for different All-Ireland finals between club and county?
Yeah, like his legend as a player is obviously for his performances in defence largely. I mean, you know, you go back to the 94 controversy over the All-Stars and all that, and getting hurt of the year, and like he was the only current player at the time to get on the team in the Millennium, and that was in a wing-back position. But the story about him and kind of his greatness is kind of bolstered all the more by what he can do as a forward and kind of proving his versatility by what he does in that final. But I suppose you just wonder, like, would the scoring slack have been picked up elsewhere? You know, in fairness, like, Offaly had a lot of very good forwards at that time. You know, would have been someone else able to kind of improve on it. Like, if you think about their 95 final, they scored 2-8. They scored 2-16 here, so it's kind of a big increase in their output. I mean, similarly, they got 111 in that year's Leinster final, but it's just more like the 98 championship. I don't know, would it be remembered in the same way if Kilkenny had won the All-Ireland? You know, the fact that, like, why it's kind of remembered so much because everything that happened off the pitch and the way that Offaly are the kind of backdoor champions and everything that happened with the 3-game saga in the semi-final, in a way, Whelahan as well being the kind of the hero coming off his sick bed, it's kind of the fitting end to this, you know, mad kind of summer. And as well as that, I suppose it kind of rounds off that. I know Offaly got to the final again in 2000. I think, you know, Verney has said this, that was kind of the last stand, was it that year at the semi-final when they beat Cork, but they get their second All-Ireland win, that team in the 90s, when maybe they get the fortune that year, maybe they get it as well in 94. Like, you could argue, did they play better hurling in 95, the year they lost it? Was that the year that they had more regrets? I mean, they were brilliant that year, weren't they, in the Leinster final? But this kind of caps it off, the fact that they get that kind of second All-Ireland. It kind of, I suppose, confirms the legendary status of kind of that team and of Whelahan himself.
The 95 final was on TV the other night, and like you said, Offaly had scored 2-8, and with like 10 minutes to go, Joe Dooley was taken off, and I don't think they scored again after that. Now, I'm not saying it's the only reason, and you know, there's a few reasons that they lost that game, but that definitely stuck out to me. We'll probably do that one another day, another sliding doors moment. But Michael, what about the fact that if Kilkenny had to win that final, if Whelahan didn't go get flu, didn't go full forward, Kilkenny had to win that, would Brian Cody have been appointed a couple of months later, or would Kevin Fennelly have remained?
There you go. You could say Brian Whelahan and the Offaly boys were the cause of one of the greatest managerial reigns and the 11 All-Irelands that followed. No, it's a fair point. Like, Kevin Fennelly obviously was. I remember watching interviews after, he was fairly down in the dumps after, and a couple of months later, Brian Cody comes in. Nobody could have predicted what was going to happen in, you know, the good to 22 years that followed and the 11 All-Irelands. But that's yet another sliding door. Like, the sliding doors in 98 are just outrageous. Wexford are up 2 points going into injury time. Johnny Dooley gets a goal in Croke Park in Leinster semi-final. He pulls on a ball in amongst 24 bodies. The Wexford team that had won All-Ireland in 96, won a Leinster in 97, are now gone. They're out of the championship at the Leinster final. Then Offaly get in. They're obviously beaten in the Leinster final. Babs calls them a sheep in a heap. Babs is gone. Michael Bond is in. You know, what's the name? Bond, Michael Bond. Like, this was absolute, like, paper. It was paper magic back then. New media must have absolutely loved what was going on. Then you have obviously Jimmy Cooney blowing up early in the second game in 98. Off the Offaly sit-down protest. Playing 6 days later or 7 days later in Semple Stadium, Joe Dooley delivering one of the greatest performances ever, and Offaly winning the All-Ireland. But that was the last stand for Clare as well. So Clare were the best team in Ireland in 98. There's no doubt about that. They were the most consistent team in 98. They just couldn't find a bit more after kind of the demoralising effect of winning a game in their eyes and then not winning it. They didn't win another All-Ireland in 2013. So there's so many different sliding door effects as a result in 1 year. I think that's why it's such a fabled year in GAA history. And as you say, I don't think people would have been talking about it or would, you know, remember it in such glorious circumstances if Kilkenny had won the All-Ireland. It was because Offaly did it and because it was against the grain.
Okay, so that's our sliding doors moment for this week. Michael, can we get the fourth and final clue and see if we can get anywhere with it?
Yeah, people are struggling with this one this week. They're really, really struggling. So the first one is, I am an All-Ireland senior hurling winner in the past 10 years who was older than Verney but younger than Saint. I have won All-Irelands as a player and a coach. My 2 All-Irelands were serving under the same manager, and I am flexible with where I can play. I could be number 1 or I could be number 14.
Oh, Fintan, what do you think? Number 1 or 14?
I appreciate it could be a bit abstract and you're going to have to probably think outside the box a bit. But after Fintan getting it after the third guest last week, I had to spice it up a little.
I think you have me bet anyway. Fintan?
I'm stumped as well.
Yeah, do you want to tell us, or will we keep it for the top of the next show and we'll let the viewers guess?
I think we'll keep it for the top of the next show and we'll put out the clues on social media and just see if people are able to get it in the meantime.
Okay, well that's it for this week. Fintan O'Toole of The42, Michael Verney of the Irish Independent. Thank you very much, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks very much, Ed.